Okay, with that, I'll call the meeting to order. The November 4th meeting of Council is called to order. First item on the agenda, we don't have anyone excused from the meeting at this point, but I think there's some people leaving this afternoon. That's noted, I believe, right? We'll move to adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting. Any discussion on the minutes of the previous meeting? That's the October 7th, 2021 meeting, 2021-10-7 council minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? So moved, Councillor Crispin.
Reeve Dirksen, I would also like to remind you not to make the same mistake I did with my meeting, was to do introductions. We have guests, so I apologize to all of you for missing that step this morning. It's coming up on the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Crispin. All in favor of approving the minutes as presented? Thank you, that's carried. Now we move to item number, approval of the minutes for the organizational meeting 2021-10-28. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? So moved, Councillor Neil Johnson. All in favor that we approve those minutes, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. Call for post-agenda items. Are there any post-agenda items to add to the agenda? Matt, please.
Have a conversation around meeting with MLA Frey on November 19th.
Okay,
we'll put that on
up later.
Yeah.
Thank you. None others? Okay, then adoption of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Screever. All in favor of approving the agenda? That is carried. Thank you. Question period / notice of motion. Are there any questions?
And then typically ask Todd if there's anybody in the virtual world.
Okay. Todd, is there anyone out in the virtual world with questions for us this morning?
Yes, good morning, Reeve Dirksen. I have 0 questions in the queue. We do have 12 people viewing on the internet, so if there's anything that comes up, I'll be sure to try to interject as politely as possible.
Thank you. Not having observed this procedure that often, we've got to get used to this, so bear with us, please, but we'll carry on. I think at this point, the introduction of guests.
Why don't you start with the councillors and then we can start with the guests.
Let's begin. We'll introduce ourselves as councillors. This is our first regular meeting. I'll call on Councillor Johnson to begin with introductions.
My name is Neil Johnson. I'm councillor for Division 10.
Amanda Philpott, Division 8.
Good morning. Ellen Unruh, and I represent the countryside around the village of Rosemary.
Greg Screever, Division 5.
Good morning. I'm Holly Johnson. I represent Division 4, Scandia, Rainier, and Bow City.
Good morning. Arno Dirksen, Division 9 in the GEM area.
Matt Fensky, County Administrator.
Lynette Kopp, Division 3 Councillor, which is Patricia Millicent.
Adina Scandrett, Division 2 Tilly area.
Dan Short, Rolling Hills, Division 1.
Good morning, Kelly Chrisman, the west side of the county.
Hi there, Lane Johnson, the Director of Corporate Services.
Ariana Nielsen, Executive Assistant.
Okay, thank you. We thank you and welcome all. We move to item number 7.1. The CIBC presentation group is online. If you'd introduce yourselves and proceed with your presentation, we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, Reeve and Council. My name's James Hobson, and I'm here with my colleague Chart Chahal. We're from the Hobson Chahal Advisory Group at CIBC Wood Gundy. We've been managing the investments for the county for approximately 4 years now, and we understand there are some new members today, so we'd like to just briefly update you on sort of who we are, what we do, our process, and then give you a quick update on the portfolio, how it's performed, and then we've got just sort of a key highlights economic update for you. I understand we're a bit pressed for time. I think we're allocated 15 minutes, so we're just going to jump into it here.
Before we start here, I just want to request access to share our screen, if we could get that as well.
I think you should be able to share your screen. I'm not sure where you need to hover there on life size towards the top, or if it's at the bottom. Can you speak to that?
It just says it says council is presenting, so it won't let us click on the screen share.
Yeah, just give us 2 seconds.
No problem. Perfect. Just want to make sure everybody can see the PowerPoint that's up right now.
Looks good.
Perfect.
Perfect. So we'll just jump right into it here. So just a bit of background on us. We work with 55 municipalities, mostly in Alberta. Our clients also include a lot of other public sector institutions like school boards, charities, water commissions, that sort of thing. We manage just over $2.8 billion, and we're one of Canada's largest teams in customized institutional investment management. Now, just to kind of give you the 4 pillars of sort of our approach and how we do things, number 1 is preservation of capital. So everything we do is fully principal guaranteed by either a bank or a province. Everything's fully compliant with the Municipal Government Act, Section 250. So anything we do, principal protection is a must. Our business has been around since 1983, and we've never realized a single loss in any municipal account for over 36 years. So that's through a lot of interest rate cycles and just kind of proves the robustness of the strategy. The second key pillar is risk mitigation. So we've worked with administration and council on sort of fine-tuning the investment policy over time to make sure that we are appropriately diversified among the different issuers of bonds and terms and things like that. And once we're in that sort of safe box, our job is to maximize the return on investment. So how can we get the best bang for our buck, especially in this sort of safe environment? The key challenge here, and we're going to get into this, is how do we protect these reserve funds from the eroding effects of inflation? So but last but not least is liquidity needs. So we structure the portfolio working in conjunction with administration, which has been fantastic and kept our returns good. In terms of making sure that we manage the short-term needs versus the long-term needs, because that's going to help us optimize the returns over time while making sure we still have enough liquidity for the county. Now, we wanted to provide you just an update on how the portfolio has performed since inception. So again, we started working with the county in October 2017. The annualized return is 3.56 per year. So that would be materially higher than the average bond yields during that period. And the way we were able to do that is, we won't get too technical, but just monitoring the portfolios for opportunities to crystallize excess capital gains over time, again, working with administration on that, and using some of these unique tools that we have that are just designed for municipalities. Now, I'll jump into just sort of a quick economic update here. So obviously we've come a long way in a short space of time. So these 2 charts here just show you the Canadian real GDP from pre-COVID, and on the right there is the Canadian employment from the recession peak. Now, the blue line is the COVID recession, and the gray line is the financial crisis, and the red line is the early 1990s. Now, as you can see, it was a short and sharp recession. We've had a very quick recovery relative to past recessions. And we've had a strong recovery in both GDP and employment. So Generally speaking, this was a service sector recession associated with the lockdowns, people not being able to travel or go out to eat, hospitality, all those sorts of industries were hit quite hard, but is bouncing back quite strongly. Now, just touching base just briefly on vaccinations, just in relation to how it affects GDP. The vaccinations have disrupted what we'd call the relationship between cases and fatalities. So daily fatalities on the right there, you can see have fallen more than 40%, but the number of people in hospital has only fallen about 10%. So we're just trying to refer to the impact that vaccines are having on hospital capacity, which helps us understand the relationship between shutdowns and the impact to the economy. So massive drop in daily deaths, but hospitalizations are still quite high. Now, the trouble with Canada and the reason our lockdowns were quite strict relative to our peers is that we didn't have much spare capacity in our hospitals going into COVID. So our sort of fail-safe breakpoint is a lot lower than other countries. This just shows you how much spare capacity in the ICU beds per 1,000 people, and you can see we're materially lower than the US going into the pandemic. So what that did is it meant that our restrictions were relatively tight relative to our hospitalization rates. So this shows you the hospitalizations per million people for both Canada and the United States. And the left there is just compared to how strict the lockdowns were in terms of retail and recreation mobility. So you can see there, it didn't take much hospitalizations for the restrictions to get very, very steep relative to the US. So not surprisingly, our GDP suffered a bigger hit than the US. The left there's Canada, the right there's the US. The red bar is the real GDP. And so Canada's recovering from a bigger hole than our partners to the south. And that's mostly due to our reliance on external trade and commodities. So even excluding these, Canada hasn't done as well and hasn't had as much fiscal stimulus as the US as well. I'm going to pass it over to Chart to finish up the presentation.
Thanks, James. So I want to touch on one of the key themes that essentially if you turn on any news cycle, BNN, Bloomberg, I don't care where it is, you're hearing the word inflation being a very large concern for Canada, US, it doesn't matter where it is, with the monetary policies that have basically been enacted in today's environment. And what we want to try and give you guys an understanding of today is why is the market so concerned with inflation and why we don't think if we overlay fundamentals onto that, it's going to be as large of an impact as everybody's going to see. But there are some things in between that we want to take a look at. So the reason that the market is so concerned about these high levels of inflation from a GDP standpoint is when you get high levels of inflation, historically, that can lead to the word of stagflation. It's every economist's nightmare to use this word, but stagflation is essentially when you get high inflation paired with stagnant demand in the country's economy. So that's what the market's concerned of. But if we actually look at and start breaking down the individual components of stagflation and we overlay it with our economic forecast, let's see where we kind of lie and why we as economists and portfolio managers are not as concerned. So when inflation started to pick up, this was kind of the story that we heard at the start, and it still kind of is impactful today. The spike in inflation was largely driven by the COVID-sensitive areas. So the easiest way to understand that is that when the restrictions were first enacted in, let's say, mid-2020, we were all stuck in our house. We couldn't drive anywhere. So gas was 60 cents. Well, now the world's opening back up. We have all this pent-up demand. So now gas is running at near all-time highs. So year over year, you have high levels of inflation in terms of certain components of inflation, things like gas and these transitory COVID. That's what we mean by COVID sensitive. So that's why we think that that's a short-lived environment. There are, however, going to be some concerns that we are looking at outside of the COVID sensitive items that are just not a concern yet, but things to keep an eye on going forward. The first, and this isn't just a Canada story, we're talking globally at this point, food costs are soaring worldwide. This is something we've kind of seen come up, and it's creeped up quite fast in terms of we're looking at. This is pulled from the Bloomberg this morning, where you can kind of see where the food prices have been globally. We're nearing all-time highs. The energy crisis made it a large headache because essentially without getting too technical, some commodities, crude and things like that, are inputs into fertilizer where undeveloped nations need that as a cheap feedstock source for their fertilizer. So with crude running at all-time highs, it's causing inflationary pressures in terms of food consumption. Some regions are still going to continue to see that food security challenges. With that high level of costs, they're going to have to mitigate that. But the biggest thing that we've seen, James touched on it in terms of supply chain issues as well. But the bad weather has hit harvest, freight costs have soared, and labor shortages have essentially roiled the food supply. So the food supply and food inflation as one of the components of inflation, one to watch, is not going to go away anytime soon. And that's largely driven by the global issue that is supply demand right now, and supply chain is impacting every sector. And this is a sector that is impacting, which is terrible for undeveloped nations, less so for us here in Canada. Here in Canada, the component you want to look at in terms of inflation is the silent inflation killer that we like to call it, which is wage inflation. Wage inflation is one that never gets talked about, but it is very, very, very important, especially when we're talking private versus public, which essentially end up competing against each other. In the US, that's the blue line that you guys are looking at, wage inflation is at all-time highs. We see inflation coming up very large. It's not as high on the black line that you're seeing in Canada. That doesn't mean that that gap can't be closed quick, but that's one to watch. Wage inflation is one that every economist is looking at right now to watch as a factor from inflation going forward. So if I were to sum up the inflation side of stagflation, yes, inflation may be high. It's transitory. There are some concerns in there, but not large enough to be hitting the emergency brake trigger at this point. The other side of that coin, we touch on a bit, is you need high inflation paired with slow growth. So from a growth perspective, let's look at capacity on what's going to drive that growth. Well, when everybody was stuck at home, all the banks, you can kind of see, look at how much deposits have been sitting online. Household savings have gone through the roof. If you look at the average between 25 to 2019 to the amount of billions, hundreds of billions we've seen an increase in that savings, 2021, 2022 forecast, 20 and beyond, we have a lot of capacity or dry powder sitting on the side to stimulate the economy. So yes, even if inflation does run real high, we're not going to have stagnant growth because we do have significant amount of capacity to stimulate our economy. So that's inflation, one of the big pieces that we're looking at right now. I'm going to take a step back and come a little bit more domestic for us here in the province and talk a little bit about oil. We've been doing economic forecast for a really long time. I'm an internal optimist, and finally my internal optimism has actually turned into reality. We've done, before I was saying that COVID could be the catalyst that Alberta needs to have a long, essentially commodity super cycle for crude oil, natural gas, you name it, and that's exactly what happened. Historically, what has essentially happened was the original oil crisis was caused by supply issues, and what COVID essentially did was it dried up and created permanent, it took supply offline, essentially in terms of the US. It's kind of two sides to a coin here. A lot of the times you'll hear in the news, and you saw the climate change summit just, I think it was yesterday, the day before, where you have this big push for environmental, social governance, climate change, things like that. The reality of when you get a demand shift like that is the US shale market, which is what caused the large collapse in oil in the first place, that's permanent production that's coming offline. And whether it's because of mandates in the US or just banking policy changes in the US, that oil is permanently offline. That's not coming back online, which is really good for us here in Canada because we have a lot of that oil anyways. So from a supply perspective, we saw that coin start to shift. From a demand perspective, very easy to understand. All of our economies were turned off during COVID. Now as you're starting to turn back on, you have huge amounts of pent up demand from the supply chain disruptions that are causing a really good positive rebound for us here in Alberta. And not just, and this is a key metric here, we talked a bit about diversification in terms of Alberta. We want to make sure we're diversifying in terms of sector and industries. If we look at where the actual employment has come back since the beginning of the shutdown, it's not just in temporary or oil and gas jobs. It's not even in the service sector jobs that have been hit. The employment that's come back in Alberta is in meaningful professional services like professional scientific services, finance, insurance, and real estate, not just mining and oil and gas. So the employment that we're seeing in terms of real gains is a diversified level of employment. So very positive news story and cycle for here in Alberta. If I can give you guys one thing to take away from our presentation today, it will be this slide. And this slide essentially shows you where we're going to be versus our budget forecast. And it's going to be a very large beat in terms of where we were forecasting to be in terms of the provincial budget versus where we're actually going to land up because, again, of COVID. COVID, obviously, a brutal geopolitical platform that everybody in the world has gone through together. However, for us here in Alberta, we haven't had a positive news cycle in a very long time. And for the first time in a long time, it was the catalyst that's going to prove very positive for here and for Alberta, probably for the next 3 to 5 years is what I would probably forecast. So if I can give you guys anything today, Alberta is going to be poised for a really good budget beat and a really good positive news cycle in terms of development and growth going forward for the next half decade or so. Taking that lens back and going back to our 30,000 foot view in terms of what Canada is going to do, we've seen interest rates are super low, and we've seen this lower for longer cycle for so long, and now the market is finally saying, "Hey, Bank of Canada, when are you going to start to raise interest rates? Inflation is super high, things like that." Well, the Bank of Canada is very cautious in terms of how they're going to be raising their interest rates, and it's for this exact reason. The two slides you're kind of seeing, what you're kind of seeing on the left side there is the effective interest rate on household debt, as everybody knows, over the last 20 years, has been coming down and kind of coming down for a really long time. And on the right-hand side there, you're seeing every 1% change or every 1% decrease of essentially effective interest rates on our debt, how much that actually impacts our consumer spending, which makes sense. The less you spend on debt, the more you're going to impact consumer spending and spend more there. This is what the Bank of Canada is looking at. They're very smart. They don't want to stifle out the economy too fast. So because it's a very sensitive issue. Now, the good news, and this is kind of our final slide today because I want to make sure we had some time for questions. The good news for what we're kind of saying here and how we're going to relate it back to you guys' portfolio and the positive news cycle for you guys here is these charts look very complicated, but essentially what you're looking at is black line means CIBC's forecast, our economist forecast. The blue line, is less important here. We'll focus on the gray line. The gray line is where the market expects interest rates to kind of be, where the market is smart, where they essentially expect the Bank of Canada to start hiking rates. You can see on the left-hand side there, that's the US. There's a very large disconnect between the gray line and the black line. The market's not pricing in enough rate hikes. That is less of a concern for us because our portfolio, the County Newell's portfolio, is all in the Canadian side. We don't take any US exposure or anything like that. So if we look at the right-hand side of the chart there, you can see that market expectations and forecasts are almost directly in line. And what this means for the portfolio is when you see things like this, it means that volatility in the portfolio is going to be very low. It means the market's already pricing in price moves. So we don't see any forecast or changes to the volatility of the portfolio, whether they raise rates or not. It's not going to move because it's already priced in. But the very positive news cycle is because they're starting to raise rates, and as you can see, because that cycle is going to be positively sloping, it means that any short-term cash that you guys have in the shorter end of the portfolio, you're going to start earning a lot more on your deposits, whether that's from County Newell or everybody's individual bank accounts. You're going to see saving rates start to pick back up, but more so in terms of you guys' long-term portfolio and long-term capital reserve fund, it means that us, as our return expectations, we can start to increase those return expectations because any of you guys, your maturities or any of those short-term maturities we have, we're now taking and reinvesting at those higher level of interest rates. So your portfolio is very well diversified. It's essentially a bomb ladder where we've staggered your maturities along the shortest end of the yield curve for exactly the scenario where we have maturities coming due that we can then take and realize at higher levels of interest. We talk a lot in a very short amount of time. We want to be cognizant of you guys' time as well. But what I want to do right now is just kind of pass it back to council and administration, just if we have any questions for us.
Thank you. Councillor Scriver has a question. Thank you for that presentation. We do have some questions.
Thank you very much. Great information. I have just a general question regarding our portfolio. We know that there's going to be a market correction at some point. We're seeing highest levels with the TSX right now than we ever have. There's going to be a market correction at some point. What percentage are we in the market, and what percentages are we in more of a stable environments like the bonds, short-term, long-term bonds?
So very happy to report that decision gets pulled out of our arms completely. With the Municipal Government Act, Section 250, we're not allowed to buy anything at risk anyways. So we don't actually own any equities. And that's a legislative issue where your entire portfolio has to be principal guaranteed. We can't take any at-risk positions anyways. And just to kind of, add that as well, even if there is a market correction, what that generally means for the bond market is you're going to see interest rates start to rise, which is exactly what our last slide was. The market's saying that interest rates can't be this low. Interest rates are going to start to pick up because they're not being compensated enough. You can get a correction in the equities. We can definitely get a correction in bonds as well. The market's already priced in that correction. So what it means for you guys' portfolio is that price from where it is right now is not going to move because those rates are in line with market expectations, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, thank you for that presentation. We appreciate you joining us to update us on our portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, we'll move to item 7.2 on our agenda, the RCMP quarterly reports. I'll call on Sergeant Yetman, please, to lead the presentation. Welcome to our meeting. We apologize for the delay. We'll get our beat over time here, and it'll.
Not a problem. Good morning, Reeve and Council. I guess first of all, I'd like to start by congratulating the Reeve and new council members on the outcome of the election. So this is actually, I believe, my first time since 2017 actually appearing before live county council here. So it's quite an event for me. I was last here in 2017. I was here for about 6 months working with Chris Zanadine, for anybody that remembers Chris. That's when I got the bug and decided that one day I was coming back here, and here I am. So what I have for you today is just a bit of an overview of the last 3 months, so my quarterly report. And then I have a bit of an update on kind of where we are at the detachment in terms of resources and whatnot. So. And if at any time there's any questions, don't hesitate to ask. So, okay, so from this report that I'm giving you this morning is from July 1st to September 30th, and we'll make up October somewhere else. So from July 1st to September 30th, Brooks Detachment members responded to 675 rural calls for service. Detachment members issued a total of 288 violation tickets out in the rural area. A total of 84 prisoners were lodged in detachment cells, and we did 79 provincial criminal record checks. So as you can see, for a 3-month period, it was quite steady, and this is just the provincial side and not what we do on the municipal side. So we had some significant files or files that were kind of noteworthy. So on July 10th, Brooks members responded to a report of an explosion on a boat at the Rolling Hills Reservoir. On arrival, members located several people with various types of burn injuries. All injured persons were transported to hospital and treated. The boat was a total loss. To the best of my knowledge, I believe all of those persons that were involved in that have recovered from those injuries. On September the 6th, while assisting Redcliffe Detachment with a robbery investigation, Brooks RCMP members located the suspect vehicle traveling westbound on Highway 1. When the vehicle appeared to have run out of gas, the driver fled on foot. Members caught up to the driver and attempted to arrest him. The driver assaulted the members. The members did not sustain any serious injuries, and the suspect was arrested without further incident. From July 1st to September 30th, Brooks members responded to a total of 5 mental health calls. Again, we're talking the provincial side. So 5 mental health calls and conducted 6 well-being checks within the county. All of the interactions were conducted without incident and resulted in the involved persons receiving the appropriate level of care. So that's something that, as a group, we're quite proud of, that none of those resulted in any form of physical altercation or anything like that. Okay, so for staffing, to date, we've received 3 new experienced members here in Brooks. 2 of the members have previous experience working with municipal police services, and the 3rd transferred in from another RCMP detachment from Lloydminster. We have 3 members that are still due in. 1 member is coming to us from Depot, and actually he just started this morning. He looks very new. So 1 member is coming to us. So we have that member from Depot, and the other 2 are transferring in from other detachments. So we have a member coming to us from Lac La Biche and a member coming from Coaldale, and this will be that member, the Coaldale member's 2nd time working in Brooks as well. So some people are returning for a 2nd go. So that's where we're at as a detachment. And before I move on to the crime gauge, I just want to touch on some of the tremendous work being done by our community policing unit. So back in the spring, we stood up a community policing unit, and they hit the ground running, and they've been exceeding all of my expectations for that particular unit. So some of the work that they've done, kind of as it ties into our rural area here, they did a Halloween candy giveaway with the Brooks Bandits. So the RCMP and the Bandits in Dutchess. Everyone had a great time by the sounds of it. And they're also continuing with attending the Bow Slope cattle auction at least once a month. And this is a way of reaching out and connecting with our ranching and agricultural residents. So that seems to be going fairly well. And I think they've been doing some neat things like bringing new members out there to introduce them at the event and whatnot. So by all accounts, everything seems to be going fairly well. Now, for some of the numbers, where are we, or where were we over the past quarter? So what we saw was an increase in persons crimes. So it's showing 103% increase. What we're seeing there, we have had an upswing in domestic violence. And this is kind of something that we saw coming, several months into COVID. So more people are at home, maybe financial pressures, whatnot. So there has been a definite rise in domestic related investigations. Good news is, on the heels of that somewhat bad news, property crime, 19% decrease. Other criminal code offenses, a 20% decrease there as well. So a bit of a marginal increase in overall total criminal code offenses of about 5% overall. Property crimes, selective property crimes, 42% decrease in break and enters. For theft of motor vehicles, we had 2 fewer instances, and there was a 4% increase in theft under $5,000. So we have 1 more instance to make up that 4%. So that's the stats at a glance. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Councillor Christman, please.
Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
My question is your wellness visits.
Yes.
Can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, wellness checks can be virtually anything. However, it is something nowadays that's being treated as more of a high risk, because when you get something like a wellness check, you actually have no idea what you're walking into. So a wellness check, typical wellness check for us could be somebody hasn't seen or heard from a neighbor in several days. It could be something along the lines of a family member calling in saying they're concerned for the health or mental health of a relative, and they're asking us to go over and check on that. So that's the type of things we're doing as far as wellness checks go. So it could be something relatively minor, or you could get there and find out that you're dealing with something fairly significant. I hope that answers the question. Awesome.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Seeing none, thank you for coming in today. And again, thank you for the good work you do in our community on behalf of all of us. We appreciate that. And thanks for your reporting to us this morning.
Thank you very much, Reeve. Councillors, have a great day.
Thank you. And you as well. Yeah, moving to item 7.2.2, Bassano RCMP Constable Andrews, please. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Staff Sergeant Yetman said, congratulations on your appointment. I see a lot of new faces, so I'm excited to get involved and get it into some new things for you guys. So as we said, we're going to go over the Q2. As you know, Bassano's a little bit smaller. We have 3 constables and myself, the corporal, as the commander. We police Rosemary, Gem, most of the county of Newell, Hussar, and Bassano. And so our priors, which was approved by council prior, one is community engagement. So we've done 19 youth engagement sessions. What that includes is crime tip videos. One of the positives of the pandemic is we found a new way to reach our residents on social media. So every other Friday, with the partnership with Safe Communities, we post a video about trends with rural crime and how to prevent it, such as making sure you lock your door, certain things such as fraud, which has been actually a pretty big issue lately. We also do reading sessions. With some of our schools, we're not allowed to go inside due to the pandemic, so we've been doing reading sessions so we can still reach our youth. We've also did the Bassano Bike Rodeo. So basically what that is 2 of our members, we go there, we show the young kids of how to have safe bikes, as well as making sure they wear helmets. We have a little bit of a competition, so that was quite positive. We also did Rosemary anti-bullying presentation. So it was myself to 2 grades for about 2 hours, presented to some of the students about the importance of not bullying and some of the risk and issues with that. We also was pretty exciting is we did a special class in GEM school. And what we did with there is we explained to them how to do an investigation. So we did a mock investigation and it was pretty well received. Our next is safe roads. We had 5 impaired drivers, which were charging your communities, which we actually have seen a downturn from last quarter. We had about 7 or 8. So that is nice. It seems like residents are learning the importance of either having a designated driver or walking home. We gave 99 tickets to motorists over 140 kilometers an hour. Almost all of our tickets are from people out of province that are going through Highway 1. We had 11 motor vehicle collisions. Our next priority is crime reduction, specifically for rural property crime. We did 165 rural crime patrols in your area. So what that means is my members need to spend at least 45 minutes in the rural areas, basically flying the flag and looking to see if there's any trends or issues. I think between that and Bassano Rural Crime Strategy Project, and what that entitled is for some of the new councillors is one of our members went door to door to all our rural residents, gave them information on how they can prevent crime. They were given signage as well so that they can let, such as it said, Bassano RCMP is monitoring the property. We found a large deterrence is having signs in well-lit areas. We did see a 32% decrease in overall rural crime, which is a big priority in all of Alberta, so we are pretty excited to see that. We had 225 calls for service. This Halloween, what we ended up doing is going to all our communities, and my members were throwing candy at kids and playing some music for them, so that was quite good. And this year, the motorists were very good. Last year, we had a impaired driver that we were able to get off the road. We have seen a huge increase in persons crime, mainly historical sex assaults. I'd like to attribute to that is people are feeling more comfortable with speaking with us and coming forward. So That may sound like a terrible increase, but actually for us, that's a good thing. We're able to give some justice. That is really all we did have 9 mental health calls as well, which we're still trending about the same, a little bit higher than before the pandemic, as we can all understand that we expected those numbers to increase. And if there are any other questions, that's it for me, for my report.
Thank you, Councilor Andrews. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation and the good work you do. I do have some grandchildren in the GEM school. That was a very successful initiative there, as well as the distribution of information in the community. Appreciate that. And
thank you.
Thank you for your service to our communities.
Thank you, Reed. Guys, have a good day.
Let's move to Safe Communities Committee, please.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to echo both detachment commanders' congratulations to everyone's appointments here. I wanted to keep my report relatively short, but I'm biased. I think it's still exciting. So basically, just to give a brief of what my position looks like within the city and the county is that I am jointly funded, myself and the committee are jointly funded from the city and the county, and we try to provide the same services to both the city and the county, even though they definitely have to be customized. But I work with both Bassano and Brooks RCMP, and then both city and county peace officers, and then we try and pull in other emergency services as we can. But I basically cover anything that is crime prevention, community safety, officer engagement, anything like that. So one of the big things that I have been bringing up in past meetings that we're really excited to announce as of Friday is that our project, basically named the traffic stop communication cards, are finally finished, and I will submit an example of what they look like so everyone can kind of have a reference. But basically what they are is it's an aid for both officers and community members to ease, I guess, the additional stress that can be placed on traffic stops from any kind of communication barriers. So that could be speech barriers, that could be maybe hearing disabilities, that can be maybe just English just is not your first language. And you already, like, honestly, the main example that I give is that lots of people are coming to the city and the county from places that police are not generally a good presence, right? They're not very just. So when they come here, they're not really sure right off the bat if they're getting pulled over by the police. Well, am I going to jail right off the bat? Like, they don't know. So the barriers in communication only add to that stress. So it's really wonderful to be able to have these cards. They're about this big, and again, I will send an example for everyone to be able to see. But it's really, really great for the officers to be able to reference these and kind of facilitate that communication a little bit better. And basically just explain that it might be something as simple as, hey, your signal light is out, or hey, you need to put on your seatbelt, or something like that. And how they work is that they can be translated right now. They're translated into about 5 languages, and we're hoping for more, but we're just very excited about that resource. On top of that, so another thing that's really relevant to mention is that I'm also part of the community policing unit in the Brooks RCMP, so I'll reference them a lot, but we do go out into the county. One of the things that we are getting started this month is we are doing something called a business pop-in. So with crime reduction, there's a principle called crime prevention through environmental design, and there are specific points that you basically cover if you're trying to reduce the amount of crime that a certain business, property, anything like that is experiencing. So we are striving to reach all of the businesses, ideally in the city and the county, to be able to meet with all of the business owners and address any concerns they have. Because we noticed, even just doing foot patrols and stuff like that in Main Street Brooks, we noticed that just popping in to see if everything was okay in those businesses and if they've been experiencing anything almost suspicious activity, stuff like that. Right there, they had questions off the bat for an officer that they weren't sure if they could go to the detachment for. So we have kind of started this initiative so that we can just go to those businesses, and we're basically offering our resources, offering if they would like a consultation. And if they do, we're going to do a little walk around their business and try and basically address any concerns that might prevent property crime in the future, which is really, really beneficial. One other really exciting thing is that the Prairie Post newspaper covers our unit a lot just with our work with the community. And really exciting this week is actually the Toronto Star picked up some of the work that we've been doing with Sebastian and a lot of our other officers for outreach on social media, which was really, really cool to see. So we've been getting a lot of recognition for that. It's the silly thing that I bring up in the meetings, but we're very excited about the reach that we have on social media. I know that TikTok is definitely the one we seem to have the most success with. We've had officers pull over youth and even adults in a traffic stop they're basically getting a ticket in that interaction, and right off the bat they're like, oh my gosh, I've seen you on social media, and they're all excited, and it's totally changed the look of that interaction. So it's really cool to see that. But that's where we've been seeing a lot of recognition outside the county and people thinking that, wow, like, look how awesome the county is, look how awesome the city is. So very excited about that, but engagement has been amazing for that. One thing that we're doing both with Bassano and Brooks in all ages, all schools and daycares and stuff like that is our officer reading program. So basically they can request a regular visit or just every once in a while, and an officer can come in and read a book of their choice, or one, like right now we're doing certain ones in daycares to cover like children's rights and like safety and stuff like that. And it's been really beneficial because some kids are just excited that there's a police officer, and some kids have made comments about how police officers are bad and mom and dad said you need to avoid them. And we really need kids especially to know that officers they're safe. They're a safe person. You see a police officer and it doesn't mean it's a bad thing, it's a good thing, you know, which is super important. And as Sebastian mentioned, we've had officers both from the Bassano detachment and the Brooks detachment also going to schools, helping facilitate the Kids in the Know program, which is basically all about online citizenship. Because obviously we all know that there are people on the internet that maybe have less than positive intentions. So this is really important information that we're giving to kids of all ages about how to protect themselves online and how to be really conscientious of what you're doing and just different things to look out for. That's about it for our community engagement updates right now. In my report, which I realized this morning did not send through, so I'll make sure that I resubmit that today. But I do list all of the things that we cover on the radio. We are on the radio every Friday, 3 times a day with officer safety messages. A lot of the things that have been covered in the past weeks have been firearm safety, because we've had incidents with even not real firearms, but kids coming around in the city and the county with BB guns and stuff like that, maybe firing them off, not taking them very seriously. And some kids have sometimes even been struck by the BB guns. So we're very much conveying how serious that is, both on social media and the radio, because that is definitely a very serious thing that needs to be addressed. And the only other thing on my report is just that we are still doing our regular appearances at Bow Slope, and we tend to have a bigger turnout officer-wise for those because we've told them about the breakfast that they have at Bow Slope. So instead of having me and 2 other members of our community unit, we have 5 members come in, and everyone kind of goes, oh, okay. But by the end of it, everyone's sitting around us and chatting, and it seems to be a really good social outing for people to either ask about experiences they've had on their rural properties or just ask general questions. And I know that especially from my side of the table, where I do a lot of the community engagement stuff, I see there's a lot of people where you see a lot of stereotypes and stuff like that, or assumptions made about police, and it's basically just things that can be fixed by being transparent and being out in the community and stuff. So it's really great to do that stuff and be able to almost fix those assumptions, because they ask those questions and say, well, no one will tell us. And we'll sit down and be like, hey, we're going to lay everything out on the table as long as it doesn't go against confidentiality and officer safety. So it's really, I think that those outings are really appreciated by the community, because they're questions that people wouldn't necessarily go to the police station to ask, but they'd still like the opportunity. Other than that, we just are still doing our car seat clinic. We are going to be doing, I'm not sure what we're doing, but we're going to be doing something at Veterans Park for Remembrance Day. And then our community policing unit is going to be all over the county in December, because we just decided this morning that we're probably going to do 12 days of Christmas for community engagement. And we have yet to decide what that looks like, but I'm very excited to get out into the county for that. Definitely a less statistic-based report on my end, because mine is a lot of events, but that is the gist of my report for this meeting.
Thank you. Any questions? Again, thank you for the good work you do. It's effective in the community. We'll move now to John Nesbitt, our Municipal Enforcement Supervisor, please, for me. County report.
John, sorry, can you turn on your mic?
There we go. I was more worried about getting this mask off there, wasn't it? Good morning, and again, welcome to everyone with Council. My report is for July through to September 2021. During this quarter, our department focused on construction zones, off-highway vehicles, distracted driving, and school and playground zones for speeding as per the traffic safety calendar. Our department issued 69 tickets and 63 warnings during this time period. There were 92 investigations that we conducted also during this time. Our department, with Safe Communities there, are involved in community engagement activities. These activities were participating in social media, where a community peace officer spoke on TikTok. There were a variety of questions asked during the TikTok segment from all over North America and even as far away from Australia. There was also local media segments that we participated in on sharing the road with large farm equipment. We as well conducted joint operations with the fire department and the RCMP and assisting with traffic control and investigation of a commercial vehicle at a motor vehicle collision. Our department is continuing to utilize the speed signs to help educate the motorists and to collect data when needed on traffic patterns related to speeding. And again, enclosed is a report providing further information on tickets versus the warnings issued by our department for the county only and the case files that we investigated. And that's my brief and concluded report. And if there's any questions.
Thank you. That was succinct. Any questions? Councillor Short.
With those speed signs you're talking about, that's the ones that just display the speed. I know there was one in Rolling Hills there for a while. That actually collects data for you as well?
That is correct. Yes, it records the speeds and collects the data for us just to help us determine what the traffic patterns are. Is there speeding concern? Even, I believe also a number of vehicles that go through on that street are also recorded.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation and for the good work you do on our behalf. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, at this point, I think we have, it's 12 o'clock. Our intention was to break into or move into an in-camera session to deal with some issues in camera while there was still 10 of us here. Can we go into the noon hour with an in-camera session for maybe 15 minutes or so? Would that probably do it? Does that work for councillors to stay over that long?
I'm leaving at 12:30, Arnold, so works for me.
Okay, so that if you're in favor, if you're good with that, we'll delay our lunch and go to in-camera session so that all of council can proceed.
A motion to move into councillor then, Reeve Dirksen.
All in favor, please indicate. That's carried. We'll move in camera. Coming back into our public meeting, we're looking for a motion that was advised by staff for the land purchase funded from the stabilization fund. Is there a motion to that effect?
Yes, I'd like to make that motion.
Moved by Councillor Scriver. Any further discussion? Any questions, comments, or further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor of the motion, please indicate. That's carried unanimously. We're good to go. Okay, and we'll break for lunch. Okay, we'll break for lunch for what? 10 minutes as he walks out the door. What are we, half hour, 30, 40 minutes, something like that? Okay, so let's come back at 1:30. Is that reasonable? Okay, thank you.